Welcome back to another edition of Dig Sports. I'm Andrew Alexander alongside Dig Sports editor Trey Monger here. Trey, LSU's back into SEC play, an exciting time for LSU. It's kind of a time of new beginnings. We'll get into that later. Brandon Harris officially announced as the starting quarterback for the LSU Tigers. But they're traveling on the plains and probably maybe the biggest day in SEC West modern history, I would imagine. 3 ranked matchups of top 15 teams. What are your thoughts about the weekend overall?
Overall, as in regards to LSU, they've had Auburn's number the last 3 years. Won 3 games in a row. Even last year when Auburn ended up going to the national championship, LSU for the most part dominated them for at least the first half. The second half was a little different with the rain and all that. But LSU was the better team. This year, though, however, Auburn looks to be the favorite in a game on the plains with a true freshman quarterback. It's going to be tough for LSU to go in and get one.
You mentioned the true freshman quarterback, and everyone saw the past 2 games. Brandon Harris has come in, and it looks like he served Anthony Jennings for the starting quarterback role. Played a phenomenal game. Everybody knows 9 touchdowns and 10 drives. The one drive he didn't get a touchdown was the interception, Hail Mary. How do you think this guy is going to progress against Auburn, and how tough is it for a freshman to have his first road start at Auburn?
Well, just from a tool standpoint, the guy clearly has it. The throws he makes, the decisions he makes in pressure situations, he has shown that he is very capable of leading his LSU team. However, it's a whole different animal for him now. This guy has yet to actually play in the first quarter of a game this season, and now he's being thrust into the starting role, not only against an SEC opponent, but on the road as well. And things change drastically from him from there. Not only just the game itself, but the days leading up to the game. He has to spend a lot more time in the film room. We'll have all the first reps in practice. It's a different animal for him now, and it'll be interesting to see how he responds to it.
And you mentioned last week freshman ignorance. I think that's a huge thing. That's probably the biggest thing he's got going for him. You mentioned he hasn't actually been the QB1 going into a game week. He hasn't actually had to play in a first quarter. He hasn't actually had to play against really a tough team. I know he played against Mississippi State, but it was a different type of look and vanilla defense. So he'll be going up against guys that are jacked, ready to play at Auburn. And Auburn, they have to win this game. They have to win this game because they have 5, 6, 7 ranked opponents. I mean, the one non-ranked opponent they have in their next 6 games is South Carolina. And that's a pretty good non-ranked team to go against. That's not even counting Alabama at the end of the season.
Right.
So this is a game that Auburn cannot afford to overlook. They have to win this game because they're going to have a test after test, like everybody in the SEC West. But specifically for them, they're the top dogs. They're the SEC champions. They're the ones that are going out there. We mentioned Brandon Harris. He's a freshman. That's a guy that's been getting a lot of pub and everything. But last week, he kind of saw a freshman coming out party. The past couple weeks, Leonard Fournette had his best game, had over 100 yards. Malachi Dupree, freshman wide receiver, is emerging as his go-to target, a guy that's really lighting the world on fire. How big of a role will freshmen play for this team and the success of this team moving forward?
Well, it's going to be a big role going forward, and particularly with those 3, when they committed, it was assumed that they would be the future of this team. Well, guess what? The future's now, and we saw that against New Mexico State. Granted, that was New Mexico State. Auburn, that did a lot faster, a lot stronger, a lot tougher up the middle, much better secondary. It'll be interesting to see if Harris can get away with some of the throws he made against New Mexico State against a very opportunistic Auburn defense. They've forced 7 interceptions this year, have 102 points off of turnovers. So, Brandon Harris, again, we go back to saying a freshman playing on a hostile environment, an interception can easily change his mood. We saw that with Anthony Jennings a couple times earlier in the season, so who knows?
Trey, you mentioned defense, and for the Tigers, they sustained a big loss against New Mexico State last week. Cornerback Dwayne Thomas will now be out, ACL injury. How big of a loss is that for the Tigers' defense moving forward?
It's a huge loss, and not only was he a guy that filled in both safety and cornerbacks, he was also their best pass rusher. Coming off the edge, he was the closest thing to Tyrann Mathieu they had, and now he leaves a big hole. Maybe you see a guy like Jalen Mills or a freshman Jamal Adams filling in. However, with Dwayne Thomas, that's a huge loss on the LSU defense. And I know we've talked about this a lot over the last 3 weeks. The front 7, again, will have to step up to replace that pass rush.
Yeah, Trey, it was really disconcerting last week to see, although New Mexico State only had 1 touchdown, it was a 79-yard run by the quarterback right up the middle. Flashes of Dak Prescott right there.
Yep.
And Nick Marshall's another quarterback who's dual threat, who has the option to run and can be very effective doing it throughout the season. And there's a load of weapons on this Auburn team. And honestly, if you're looking at it from LSU's perspective, it's going to be tough to slow down.
Yeah, and regarding Marshall, he's not quite as dynamic as Prescott. However, he fits the Gus Malzahn spread offense system perfectly. He's a very good running threat, and while his passing may not be the best, it's good enough to where you have to play it honestly. You can't stack 9 men in the box and try and sell it on the run. He's a guy that will spread it around. Though he has been finding Da'Keel Williams, the guy from Reserve Louisiana, the wide receiver, has 23 catches on the season, 3 touchdowns. He's been his main target, and you got to assume that he'll want to have a big day against his hometown team.
And Trey, a big X factor, I think, for this Auburn squad this year, for this game especially could be Sammy Coates. Leading receiver from last season, was injured early in the season against Arkansas with a knee injury, has been slowly coming back, had a few catches versus Louisiana Tech, has yet to find the end zone. But he's a guy that really, if he gets going alongside Nikhil Williams, like you mentioned, could give that LSU secondary fits the entire day.
Definitely, and if he's healthy, that just makes it all the more easier for Gus Malzahn's offense because, the more weapons, the better in that system. And if those two receivers are good, if Coates is healthy, that makes it all the easier for Cameron Artis-Payne, their running back, to find holes against this LSU defense that has struggled in defending one or the other, really.
Trey, looking back at last week's game versus New Mexico State, who are the biggest winners and losers from LSU?
I think winners, you have to go Leonard Fournette. You could go Brandon Harris as well, but I'm going to go a little off the tracks a little bit. Fournette had a 100-yard rushing game, a touchdown. He finally put it all together for LSU fans to see. Yes, you have to preface it by saying it was New Mexico State. However, that's 4 games in a row now where he's been LSU's leading rusher. He's been the bell cow, so to speak, and now you're going up against an Auburn defense that's only averaging 2.6 yards per carry a game. This will be a big test for him, and I think the New Mexico State game gave him a lot of confidence going forward. Losers, I think you have to go with the LSU defense solely because of the loss of Dwayne Thomas. That is a huge loss going forward. Like we mentioned earlier, the best pass rusher on the team, and he would have been very valuable going up, particularly against a spread offense like Auburn. Jalen Mills or Jamal Adams, whoever fills in that nickel role, has big shoes to fill going forward.
My winner's got to be fullback Melvin Jones. Shout out to Melvin Jones finding the end zone, first career touchdown. You got to love that when the fullback gets in there. My loser is everyone that booed anyone at LSU. I don't care if you're booing Anthony Jennings, the play calling, the lack of toppings for nachos. It doesn't really matter to me. Don't ever boo at college games or high school games. These aren't professionals. LSU fans, do better.
I want to add actually another loser, the LSU tight ends. In last week's game against New Mexico State, you saw, like we said, Melvin Jones scored a touchdown. You saw a slew of freshmen that hardly played. You saw Mickey Johnson play, of all guys. Tight ends did not catch a single pass. They weren't even targeted. That is not good going forward for them.
And Trey, before I let you get out of here, not only do I want the LSU score this week, but who do you think is going to win in the other 2 big SEC West matchups? Texas A&M travels to Starkville and Alabama heads to Oxford.
Starting with LSU and Auburn, I think for now you have to go Auburn solely because, a tough environment, and that is Jordan Hare Stadium. Maybe a task a little too tall right now for a true freshman in Brandon Harris. However, if he is able to lead LSU to a victory, that could only mean great things going forward to LSU. But for now, I'm going to say 31-27 Auburn wins. As for the other 2 games, I actually think Ole Miss pulls the upset on Alabama. They've come close a couple of times in recent years, and I think this might be their best chance to do it. I think Mississippi State's going to take down A&M.
I think Hail State, I think Roll Tide in those first 2 games. And that's something else. Les Miles is 7-2 versus Auburn.
Okay.
I think he makes it 8-2 this Saturday. 28-24. LSU comes out on top. I expect big things for Brandon Harris this week. This could be the birth of something amazing. So, for Dig Sports, I'm Andrew Alexander. This is Dig Sports editor Trey Moncrief. Check out all your LSU coverage at digbatonrouge.com.
Trevon Reed is still at Auburn.